Alright, let's start with a question nobody is quite brave enough to ask out loud. What's going to happen to the US housing market when all the boomers, well, kick the bucket? It sounds cold, but it's also the burning question on the minds of millennials and Gen Zers who are tired of renting shoebox apartments with roommates who treat their personal hygiene like it's optional. You see, the baby boomers own 40% of all homes in America, over 32 million homes according to Zillow. That's a big chunk of the real estate pie, and it's a pie the younger generations would very much like to get their hands on. But here's the twist. Despite what you might expect, there won't be a sudden rush of homes on the market when boomers start, let's say, downsizing. Nope, those dreams of easily landing a home will have to wait. This isn't some feel-good story where properties are simply handed over. Instead, the housing market might take unexpected turns, leaving first-time buyers stuck in a frustrating game, like Monopoly, but without the chance to collect $200 when passing go, and with property prices that feel like they belong in boardwalk territory. Let's get real for a second. Boomers are the kings and queens of American real estate. These folks are sitting on homes they bought for a couple of dimes and a handshake back in the 70s and 80s, while today's buyers are facing record high prices and interest rates that look like the punchline to a bad meme. According to Freddie Mac, the average first-time homebuyer today is 35 years old, compared to just 30 in 2010. Why? Because homes are increasingly unaffordable. The median price of a home in the US is over $400,000 in 2024, compared to $150,000 in 2000. And guess what? Wages haven't kept up. So while boomers are enjoying their low-interest mortgages locked in, today's buyers are looking at 7% interest and wondering how they'll ever own more than their avocado toast. Boomers aren't selling anytime soon either. Most are sitting pretty on those sweet deals thanks to historically low interest rates. According to the National Association of Realtors, 87% of new home purchases are made with a mortgage, but existing homeowners aren't keen on upgrading or moving because selling would mean ditching their low mortgage rate for today's monstrous rates. It's like giving up your cushy first-class seat for a spot in coach. You wouldn't do it unless you absolutely had to. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. I'll just wait until the boomers die off, then I'll scoop up one of their houses. Well, hate to break it to you, but it's not that simple. Boomers are living longer, healthier lives than previous generations, so the idea that there's going to be a massive death wave releasing homes onto the market is just fantasy. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, life expectancy in the US is around 77 years, and thanks to advances in healthcare, boomers could be sticking around even longer. But even when they do eventually shuffle off this mortal coil, don't expect a flood of affordable homes hitting the market. The truth is, boomers are taking their homes with them. Figuratively, of course. Many are selling their homes not because they're dead, but because they need money to fund their retirement or pay for their long-term care. According to LendingTree, 80% of Americans over the age of 65 own their home outright. That's a lot of equity, and the cost of nursing homes has skyrocketed. In 2023, the median annual cost of a private room in a nursing home hit $116,800. That's more than most Americans make in a year. So instead of leaving those homes to their kids or grandkids, many boomers are selling them to pay for their twilight years in style. You might be thinking, well, if they're selling their homes, won't that mean more houses for the rest of us? Sadly, it's not that straightforward. Enter private equity firms, those soulless corporate behemoths that see your future family home as just another revenue stream. Firms like Blackstone have been snapping up single-family homes left and right, turning what used to be the dream of home ownership into just another rental unit for their portfolios. According to a 2021 report by the National Association of Realtors, institutional investors accounted for 13.3% of all residential sales. But in certain markets, like the Sunbelt, their share of the market is even higher. What does that mean for the rest of us? It means that when these homes do hit the market, they're not going to the average buyer, they're going to big investors who are more interested in turning a profit than building a home. So even when the boomers do sell, you're likely still going to be renting from an LLC instead of a landlord. Let's talk about inheritance. A lot of younger folks are banking on the idea that one day, grandma or grandpa will leave them a cozy little house in the suburbs. And while that's a nice thought, the reality is a bit grimmer. According to a 2022 study by the Federal Reserve, only 6% of Americans inherit property, and even fewer inherit homes that they actually live in. Most of these homes are sold off to pay for retirement, healthcare, or debt, meaning your dreams of a free house could vanish faster than your student loan payments. Even worse, the properties that are passed down often go to just a handful of heirs. That means if you've got siblings, you'll probably be fighting over that house like it's the last turkey leg at Thanksgiving. And just because you inherit a home doesn't mean you'll be able to afford to keep it. Property taxes, maintenance costs, and other fees can make that gift feel more like a financial curse. And here's another gut punch. Even if you do manage to inherit a home, it might not be in a place you want to live. Boomers have been flocking to retirement-friendly states like Florida and Arizona, places with lots of golf courses but not a whole lot of job opportunities. So unless you're planning to start a new career as a golf caddy, those homes may not be as valuable as you think. Let's not forget about the younger generation who are trying to buy their first home. According to Redfin, boomers currently hold about $18 trillion in real estate wealth. That's an enormous chunk of the market. And while some boomers are selling their homes, the prices have become inflated beyond belief. First-time home buyers today are facing some of the toughest conditions in decades, with record high prices and low availability. To make matters worse, banks are now offering loans with down payments as low as 1%, thanks to companies like Zillow. While that might sound great for scraping together a deposit, here's the kicker. These low down payments just push home prices higher. More buyers flood the market, but the supply stays the same, causing prices to rise. So while you may get into a $750,000 house with just $10,000 down, you'll face massive monthly payments. This increased demand inflates prices, worsening affordability for everyone and leaving future buyers stuck with even higher costs. The only real winners here? The people who bought their homes decades ago at a fraction of today's prices. They get to sit back and watch as first-time buyers struggle under the weight of massive mortgages, all while their homes appreciate in value. While a chunk of boomer-owned homes will eventually hit the market, they're not going to do it all at once. The pace at which homes become available will be slow and steady, much like watching paint dry or waiting for student loan forgiveness. This is because many boomers won't be selling until they absolutely have to. Whether it's to pay for healthcare or because they're no longer able to maintain the property, the sell-off will trickle, not flood. The National Association of Realtors reports that the average age of home sellers in the US is 60 years old. So while boomers may start selling in the next decade, the wave won't be immediate or large enough to drastically affect supply, and certainly not enough to bring prices down. Now, we need to talk about something a little more sinister. Institutional investors. Imagine that you've been saving up, waiting for that perfect time when housing prices finally dip and boomers start selling. But just as you're about to pounce, you're beaten to the punch. Not by another millennial or Gen Zer, but by a hedge fund with deeper pockets than you could ever dream of. Private equity firms and institutional investors like Blackstone have realized that real estate is where the big money is, especially when it comes to single-family homes. According to CoreLogic, these institutional buyers scooped up 28% of homes sold in Atlanta in 2021. And it's not just happening in the big cities. In places like Phoenix, Las Vegas, and Charlotte, these firms are gobbling up properties faster than you can say Zillow. Why does this matter? Because these companies aren't looking to live in these homes, they're looking to rent them out. That means that even when boomers do sell, a significant portion of those homes won't go to first-time buyers. Instead, they'll be turned into rental properties, pushing prices even higher and making home ownership an even more elusive dream for the average person. Here's the harsh reality. More and more Americans are renting, and that's not necessarily because they want to. Many people simply can't afford to buy a home. According to a report from the US Census Bureau, the home ownership rate in the US has fallen from 69% in 2004 to 65% in 2024. A 4% drop may not sound like much, but when you consider how many millions of people that represents, it's a big deal. Now, I'm not saying renting is the worst thing in the world, but here's the kicker. Rent prices are climbing just as fast as home prices. The average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in New York City is $4,500 a month, according to Zumper. And even in less competitive markets, rents are hitting all-time highs. This creates a vicious cycle. You can't save for a down payment because you're spending most of your income on rent, and by the time you've scraped together enough for a down payment, housing prices have shot up even more, pushing the dream of homeownership further out of reach. It's like trying to catch a bus that keeps moving further away every time you run for it. Let's talk about the big elephant in the room, the wealth gap. This whole boomer housing situation is just another cog in the machine that's driving inequality in America. As boomers pass their wealth down, it's not going to be evenly distributed. distributed. The Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances shows that the wealthiest 10% of households hold nearly 70% of all the wealth in the country. So when those homes get passed down, they're not going to the average person. They're going to the already wealthy. This concentration of wealth means fewer homes available for the rest of us. And as institutional investors continue to snatch up properties, regular people are left with fewer options, higher prices, and fewer opportunities to build generational wealth. Now, I know what you're thinking. Eventually, the market has to crash, right? After all, we saw what happened in 2008 when the bubble burst. Well, don't hold your breath. While there are signs that the market is cooling off slightly, particularly with rising interest rates, there's no indication that we're headed for a full-blown crash like we saw during the Great Recession. Why? Because the fundamentals are different. In 2008, we had a housing bubble built on subprime mortgages and reckless lending. Today, the issue isn't over-leveraged buyers, it's a lack of supply and too much demand. According to a new analysis from Zillow, the US is short 4.5 million homes, and that's not something that's going to be fixed overnight. So while we may see prices plateau or dip slightly, don't expect housing to suddenly become affordable. The combination of institutional investors, boomers holding onto homes, and the lack of new construction means that the market will likely stay tight for the foreseeable future. The real question we need to ask is, what does the future of home ownership look like? Are we heading toward a society where only the ultra-wealthy can afford to buy homes, while the rest of us are stuck renting forever? It's possible. With housing prices so high and institutional investors flooding the market, the dream of home ownership is becoming increasingly out of reach for everyday Americans. But it's not all doom and gloom. Some cities and states are pushing back against institutional investors, large companies or investment firms that buy residential properties in bulk, by implementing regulations and taxes on corporate home buyers. This is because institutional investors often buy up large numbers of homes, reducing the supply of available housing for regular buyers and driving up prices. To counter this, local governments are introducing policies such as taxes on corporate home purchases, limits on how many properties a company can own, or regulations that prioritize individual buyers over corporations. The goal is to prevent corporate buyers from monopolizing the housing market and make it easier for individuals and families to afford homes. These measures aim to balance the housing market and improve affordability for local residents. And while it's not enough to solve the problem overnight, it's a step in the right direction. Speaking of the future, if you're curious about how artificial intelligence is transforming the world of work in the US and what that means for our economy, you'll want to check out my previous video where we dive into how AI is shaking things up. Click here to watch that deep dive into the revolution that's changing everything from job markets to industries you wouldn't even think of. So where does that leave us? The truth is, the future of the US real estate market is going to be as unpredictable as ever. Between boomers holding onto their homes, institutional investors driving up prices, and a growing wealth gap, the American dream of home ownership isn't dead. It's just on life support. And as always, be savvy, stay informed, and keep those money moves. See you next time.